What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I got a couple quick things that I just wanted to let you guys know about. Just a couple of it's just kind of like points of interest. One thing that I want to talk about is they did sign another player, so we'll get to that in a minute. But I wanted to start with there was reports out that were saying that prior to team facilities and visits and everything getting shut down by the NFL due to the coronavirus, the Dolphins tried to bring in some players. They were successful at bringing in like J.K. Dobbins. Who was it? Jordan Love, I think, is who they brought in, the quarterback. They did also try and bring in Tua. They did try and sneak him in for a visit before the shutdown. But they were unable to, I guess, because of scheduling issues, whatever. So that was not able to happen, but they did try. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, or one of the other things that I wanted to talk about, was that the Rams have cut Todd Gurlery. They released him, and so now he's out on the open market. Apparently he said that he would rather, his preferred place to go would either be the Atlanta Falcons or the Miami Dolphins. So that's a point of interest. And apparently prior to him getting cut, the Rams were looking to trade him, and the Dolphins and the Falcons were the ones that were reportedly interested in trading for him. So maybe that had something to do with him wanting to go to those places. I don't know. But apparently would prefer either Miami or Atlanta, and those are the two teams that tried to trade for him. Now that he's been released, it would seem as though likely one of those teams or somebody else is going to pick him up. I can't imagine that Todd Gurley's not going to get signed by somebody. But who is it that ends up signing him? Now, he's going to command a pretty big contract. Even if it's not to the size that he was on before, the size of the contract he was on before, he will demand a pretty large amount of money. And we still do need to upgrade the running back position, even though we just signed Jordan Howard. And those two could be a good combo. But again, as you guys know, I am not a fan of spending big in free agency, and they've already done it to an extreme level. They've blown through the vast majority of their cap space, or not the vast majority, to be clear, but they have gotten to they've blown through at least half, if not the simple majority, or a little bit of the majority, right? They've blown through like 50% of the cap space or so that they had. And, there's almost all of the players, while they are big names and, some of them have some decent production or whatever, there's no guarantees. Some of them, have concerns. And they're all, middle to late 20s, which means that they're somewhere in the middle or back end of their primes. And they just paid Byron Jones after Darius Slay got signed as the highest paid cornerback. Byron Jones was the highest paid cornerback, with Xavier Howard right behind him. So, and Byron Jones is, if you look at his history so far in the NFL, it hasn't been particularly great. He's got some, some decent things. Like last year, he had a low completion percentage in his zone, but he didn't get thrown to that much either. And then, there's obviously other factors, but he doesn't have very many interceptions. He's not particularly great at tracking the ball. So just based off of his stats to this point. So there are concerns, and, so we have to wait and see how all this stuff pieces together. Are they able to bring these guys in, get them to mesh, and then produce on the field? Well, we have to wait and see. But look, again, it's been proven time and time again, certainly far more than not, that when you are, when you go chasing guys and you're as if you're just one player away, and when you go, being big spenders in free agency, and when you, tank so that way you can, load your team with talent because of, all the draft picks and cap space you have, oftentimes, far more often than not, these types of methods end up backfiring. And again, the most notable that everybody wants to point to is the Browns, and they still have not, anyway, you guys know how I feel about that. So I just am not personally convinced that this is going to be a method that's going to pan out, because I feel like there's far too many things that could go wrong that could totally sabotage the entire plan. And frankly, again, I'm not the kind of fan that advocates for the philosophy of tanking to begin with. I think it's a terrible philosophy, etc., etc. And just real quick, for those who try and argue that we didn't tank, that is factually incorrect, because the amount of wins, again, even if we would have gone undefeated and won the Super Bowl, you could say how amazing it is that the coach and front office, put together such a team after having gotten rid of all those players that they did, etc., etc. But that's, first of all, that's not the case. But even if it was, it would still be irrelevant, because they did the things that they did the key things that constitute a tank, i.e. clear your team of proven talent, etc., 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 accumulate cap space and draft picks, and then try and completely rebuild from the ground up. That is, and by doing so, by also stripping your team, you put yourself in a position to not only have a bunch of cap space and draft picks, but then also have a high draft pick, if not the number one pick, depending on how bad you are, etc. But so anyway, they totally tanked. It is what it is at this point. But now they have to prove that they can put it together and that they can turn this thing around. I think it's absolutely absurd that anybody thinks that they are going to have some miraculous turnaround and be competitive all of a sudden. On paper, you could make that argument. But again, how many times have there been, they look so great on paper argument for teams across the league, and then they don't end up, panning out the way that they want to, or teams that don't on paper look like they're going to be particularly competitive, and then they end up blowing people out of the water or being surprises, right? So anyway, the final thing that I wanted to mention and talk about, though, really quick, is the player that did get signed. And he was a player that actually, in my last video, where I talked about the players that they cut, all of the list of players that they cut, he was one of those players, and that is Adrian Colbert. Dolphins are re-signing safety Adrian Colbert to a one-year, $1.775 million deal. Per Rosenhaus, Colbert was not tendered yesterday as a restricted free agent. So, I mean, that's a solid contract. The last two contracts they did, the Ted Karras contract was overall a solid one, and this one is too. I mean, this guy's a young player with upside. He was one of the bright spots from the shit season that we had last year. He's a safety, and we definitely need help at safety because we have almost nobody there at the moment. And it's super cheap because, well, he's a super young guy, hasn't really done anything yet. So that's a solid contract. But let's also keep in context, let's also keep in mind the context around it. And it's not that they would give this guy in particular a big contract, but because they've already blown through so much of their cap space, they're at a point now where, they can't really go signing they can't do a whole lot because they've already pretty much done everything they need to, because they need to have a good chunk of money for their upcoming draft class. You don't want to spend every cent you have. You would like to have some carryover to the next year, etc., etc. So, if they do sign anybody else at this point, they're not going to be able to sign them to big contracts, because then they're really going to put the cap space into potential financial binds down the road. And so, yeah, but it is good to have, it is good that they brought him back. I was kind of surprised actually when they did cut him, because I figured he would have been somebody that they would have brought back, but it was good to see that they did. Again, I'm not a fan of this approach, but if they can prove me wrong and turn it around and turn this into something, and then consistently, be contenders and get into the playoffs, etc., especially considering the expanded playoff format, then, I'll be happy to admit I was wrong, and I will love to see the team get back to, a point where they can contend and they can win stuff and, maybe win the division, especially with Tom Brady and Tom Brady being out and the Patriots looking like they're, their day is pretty much done, right? So, but they got to prove me wrong. they don't get the credit until they do it. And until they do it, I'm gonna, you know, very bluntly and honestly give analysis based off of the data and the information and the facts at hand. And so to me, it doesn't add up. But again, I hope they prove me wrong, and we shall see. So with that, I'm going to get up out of here. I hope you guys enjoy my videos and perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comments section. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Phins up.